Hey, everybody. Happy April Fool's Day. It just so happens to be when we're recording this. And welcome to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith. And full disclosure, what we're talking about today is not an April Fool's joke in any way. It just happens to take place on April Fool's Day.
True.
But for today's topic, we were thinking, you know what? We've talked a lot about the shows that we've been in or shows that we want to be in, which we're definitely speculating now that the announcement for our next show will be in the next month or so. But we haven't really talked too much about shows that we've spectated or the ones where we were in the audience just watching the performance unfold.
Yeah, yeah, true. Yeah, I don't know about Jordan, but my history with watching musical theater, just simply watching, goes actually about as far back as I can remember. I don't know. I don't know why it started even back then, but I guess you could say that all the times I've gone have kind of prepped me for what I do now with Artists Unlimited. It's kind of set me up for it.
Yeah, I feel like that can be the case for a lot of people, which is awesome. In my personal case, I was kind of exposed to it as a young kid because my brother and sister they would sometimes put on some sort of performance at school, or maybe there was a school talent show that one of us was a part of. But I didn't really see a whole lot of shows until after I was in them. Uh, but I've definitely seen a good handful, and I've got a little bit of a list here, about 7 or 8 of them that I felt like were fun to talk about because they were memorable for one reason or another. And so, to begin, the first one I wrote down, I don't know if this was the first one I ever saw after I joined our theater group, Artists Unlimited, but it's definitely in there. And that was a production of Willy Wonka. And this is before we did it. In this particular case, it starred an actor that used to be part of Artists Unlimited, but has now gone on to be on Broadway. I won't give his full name, but his first name is Mark, and he's a great guy. He's very talented, very good at acting, very good at singing. And seeing somebody that I was familiar with, knew personally, and performed alongside, being able to be a starring role, especially one that was so iconic, one that I'd always admired from Gene Wilder, and just watching him have so much fun with it. I think it was really the source of me wanting to do a production of Willy Wonka myself at some point. And of course, eventually we did. So I would say it's memorable in the sense that, for one, it was fun to watch and it drove me to really get excited if I was ever to do it. And then once I was cast as Willy Wonka, I definitely took inspiration from his performance and kind of put it into mine.
Yeah, I think that's it's pretty awesome. It's like full circle. Like Mark was Willy Wonka, and then you were Willy Wonka, and then yeah, I believe I actually saw that same performance. I believe it was on the exact same stage that we did it on, probably several years later. And I didn't know too many of the people I knew, like maybe like well, like maybe one kid in it or something. But yeah, yeah. So in a way, the Willy Wonka production I think was full circle for both of us, really.
In a way, yeah, that's it. Excuse me. That's actually a really good way to look at it.
Yeah.
And then I think this took place in the same school a few years later. And this was a production of Peter Pan. Now, with the Willy Wonka one, that was a show that I hadn't done yet and then took inspiration from. Whereas with this production of Peter Pan, By that point, I was already in it at least once. So it's like, oh, now I get to see this production from an audience perspective, and I get to see how differently some other people might do it. So it was very memorable in that sense. And yeah, there were some things I might have liked more, some things I thought maybe we did a little better, but maybe that's just bias. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
But in any case, it's still really interesting to see how a different group approaches the same thing I did years before.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw the show myself twice, on two separate occasions, 2 years apart, on the same stage that we have performed our past few AU shows. And yeah, yeah. It was interesting, they from the first time to the next time, I feel like they may have PC'd up a lot of things, but
Mhm.
I was curious to see though how it would compare to the first time I saw it.
It's kind of like when a movie gets remade or remastered, you get to see the differences in how someone else might come at it from a different angle. And it's very much the same here. And it's always really intriguing. But this isn't the only production of Peter Pan that I thought of, because at one point, I forget exactly when this was, but there was a live showing on television of a Peter Pan production. And I forget the actress who was playing Peter Pan, but I remember people that I knew getting really excited to see them perform. And yeah, because it was on television, there were some limits as to how much could be seen at one time because it was on a camera, they had to focus on certain things. But this is definitely a production of a much bigger scale than something you might find at a local theater. It's like now that I've been in this production, now I also not only get to see it from an audience perspective, but see it being done at a professional level. And I remember really enjoying it because of that. Cause it's like, oh man, that they have much more to work with. How are they going to implement this? And it was just visually not speculating. Um, it was a visual spectacle for sure. And it's like, oh, I know the songs, I can hum along with it. And I kind of felt like I was part of the show because I knew how it went and how a lot of the songs went. But just seeing a large scale production like that in any capacity was so exciting.
Was this the NBC live musical?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, with Christopher Walken as Captain Hook.
Yes, yes. I knew there was a particular guy that I recognized in there. I just couldn't remember which
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
But I wasn't sure at first how he was gonna do with that performance because a lot of people know him through like memes and the funky way he's supposedly known for talking. But if I remember right, he actually did pretty well.
yeah. Oh yeah, I admittedly didn't watch him in a bunch of things aside from like the one SNL episode he guest hosted, and he played like a crazy, womanizing, flirtatious guy in one satirical sketch that I thought that was pretty good. But yeah, honestly, I'm not as familiar probably with a lot of his material as the next guy probably is. But yeah, I mean, he's decent.
Yeah, for sure. And then this next one is kind of an interesting case. And I say that because this was a production that I was in, but I was also able to watch practically at the same time. For context, the year was 2021 when a certain virus that shall not be named, because I probably don't have to, was raining terror on the world. So a lot of social activities were forbidden or heavily restricted. Now, Artists Unlimited had not done a production the previous year for the same reason. And in 2021, they kind of found a solution. It definitely wasn't normal, though, because what they did was to limit exposure to too many people. They split the cast in half, and then each half put on the same production. In this case, it was Lion King Jr., just on different days. So, what was interesting and memorable about that is one day I could be on the stage doing my role, doing the songs, and just being part of the performance. And then the next day, see the exact same production, just with a few different people. And it's like, I was thinking, it's so weird to be at this musical, but not be up there. It was still fun to watch, though, because then I got to see how someone else playing the same role I have would approach it. And just seeing you as Scar was a blast.
Well, thank you very much.
Of course. I mean, it was definitely an unusual experience, whether it be for better or for worse. But for all intents and purposes, it was quite memorable.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. Everyone in our group that year got a ticket to see the opposite cast perform at least
Mhm.
once. And yeah, and I definitely took advantage of that. Watch and take watching you and several of our friends in the opposite cast. And yeah, yeah, it was an unusual year, but nonetheless a good one.
It definitely was. There was a little bit of a, I don't know if bittersweet is the right word for this, but this was the first production that we had done after my father passed away.
Mm.
And the first role I happened to get is centered around a character who deals with the loss of his father. So this is one of the times where I could really take from my own life and make the performance a lot more authentic. Like there's a scene where he's talking to Mufasa up in the sky. I was the adult version of Simba for people who don't know. And as the conversation ends, Simba is just saying, "Don't leave me, please don't leave me." That was legitimate for me because of what happened with my father just about a year prior. So it was a good example of when I was able to take from my own personal experiences to help amplify the performance, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I feel like that's well, probably when you have that raw connection, when you're drawing from something, or you really can really dig into that emotion. That's when it's really like the most impactful or resonant, I feel. And yeah.
Exactly. Granted, in some cases, you definitely want to be careful with that because um, it might take you over a little too much. But
Yeah.
in spurts, it can really help a performance. But in any case, moving on to more lighter notes, as it were, the next one I wrote down is Mamma Mia. This one was not at that school. This was at a different place last year.
Mm.
I can't remember the name of the place, but it wasn't too far away from where we are. But it was memorable to me because for years I'd seen the name of this production everywhere because it was a movie and then it got a sequel at some point. And especially when some of our friends were in it or knew someone that was in it, they would constantly be talking about it. They want me to go see it. And it's like, I don't know. This, from what I've seen, this just doesn't feel like the production for me. But then eventually I did go see it last year, finally. And then after sitting through it once, it's like, you know what? I kind of get what all the fuss is about.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know recently the RBTL, which is the Rochester Broadway Theater League, for those who don't know,
Yep.
did a production of it. I didn't see it, but yeah, it's like It's like when you're in a place like Rochester, you can't get away from it.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Very true. Sometimes it'll be RBTL or sometimes it'll be Jiva. But shows like that will cycle through, and if it's one you're really excited to see, like that one, then it would be good to go see it because then you know a lot of other people who are, and then you have a great conversation starter.
Yeah.
And,
And I
and
just know
heck, you
that
might, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
that's cool. I just knew that because my folks have season tickets to the RBTL and with some friends of theirs. So yeah, that's the only reason I knew.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point I'll do that too, but we'll see. Then the last two I wrote down were also like with Peter Pan Live, were done on a professional scale. And this one, I didn't, while I did see it from an audience perspective, kind of, it wasn't in person and it wasn't live. This was a Netflix release of Shrek the Musical.
Hmm.
It was one of the few places I knew where I could actually see the production, and I really wanted to see it for two reasons. One, because it was not too long before we were in our production of it. So I figured watch it, get some inspiration, and really understand the differences between the musical and the film. But then the other reason too was aside from the professional version of it and the different things that they could do that we would not be able to for budget purposes or whatever. But you know what? I lost my train of thought. But I was also just intrigued to see how Shrek, of all things, could be translated into a musical. Because when I first heard that there was a stage version of Shrek, it just felt weird to say the words Shrek the musical. But then I watch it and I see these songs that further express what these characters are going through and just how much fun it looked. It's like, I can't wait to do this personally because all these different sequences and the goofiness of a tall person playing a really short character is just so funny to me. There was a lot of humor, a lot of great songs. Who I'd Be is still one of my favorites. But just seeing something like that and knowing that I was going to be able to do something very similar in a few months, it's like that made it very memorable. And I finally got to see how they could possibly translate Shrek onto the stage.
Yeah. I don't know if I've said this before on the show or not. I feel like there's just a way that these musical adaptations of these films like um, really express what like things like what these characters are feeling and big plot points of the story in a way that the films on which they were based couldn't seem to in the whether it was because of the limited time or whatever. And like I think of one example that particularly comes to mind is Beauty and the Beast. I feel that the musical version, I feel like, gave more meat to the Beast's behaviors, and particularly songs like "If I Can't Love Her," and yeah, it just really fleshes characters and stories out more, in a way that I feel like that films have a more difficult time doing.
That's one big disadvantage that movies will often have is that in most cases, it's only able to ever focus on one thing at a time. And usually, if it's a big event or if it's something like Avengers Endgame in the final battle, you see a lot going on, but the camera is still clearly focused on one particular shot or one sweeping motion or something like that. So you won't be able to absorb everything very well, especially since it's on a screen. It's kind of like how I feel when I meet a celebrity or someone I've only ever seen on a screen in person. There's just something different about seeing them face to face. And the same thing can be said for a musical because you get to see a lot more going on at once. There could be multiple events happening at the same time, and you get to choose which one you focus on. But there's just, again, something about seeing it right in front of you that can really help you get a lot more invested.
Cool thing. I was when I'll get more into this later, but there was one. I think there was one particular actor that I was particularly intrigued by like, their performance, even when they weren't speaking. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But it's it is kind of nice because I can have a bit of a hit or miss attention span, and I kind of like to wander my eyes around. So that's kind of an advantage with the stage.
Very true. Because if you're getting tired of seeing one thing, for example, there's usually at least something else you can look at. Like you just could look over and take a gander at someone else's reaction to the main thing that's happening. And then you can drive your attention back to the main event if you need to. But there's just so much that seeing it live can really offer that is very restricted by the limits of a film.
Yeah, yeah, more flexible in the case of
Exactly.
this. Yeah.
And the last one I wrote down, I wanted to save for last because I would argue, at least for me, this was the most memorable musical performance I've watched. And I think this was at the RBTL. And this
Mm,
was Phantom of the Opera.
mm,
It was memorable to me, for one, because it was already one of my favorite musicals, but the only exposure I'd ever personally had was the 2000s film with Gerard Butler, which I still enjoy from time to time. But just seeing the stage version of it finally, I was so excited for. Plus, my parents, when I was growing up, for me, my brother, and my sister, they always said that the one musical production they wanted to take all of us to see at some point, even if it wasn't at the same time, was Phantom of the Opera. They had already taken my brother to see it at one point, especially in New York City. My sister got a chance to see it at one point, I'm pretty sure. And then one day when they saw it was local and they knew how much I love the story, they finally brought me to see it. And I loved every second of it. And I could feel the intensity even from the back, because I was in one of the back rows. And at one point, when they were having that duel in the gravesite, at one point the Phantom has flames shooting up. And even from all the way in the back of the theater, I could feel that heat. But just as I expected, the music was phenomenal. The acting was incredible. And one thing that always amazes me about the Phantom of the Opera musical production is the way the Phantom disappears at the end. Because usually, at least with the stage version, he vanishes right before everybody that's trying to track him down walks in. So he has about a split second to cover himself in some way and make it look like he's just completely gone. And the one that I saw, he had the secret exit underneath a chair, or like the cover of a chair, the seat of a chair. And pretty much the moment the blanket covers where he just was, somebody chasing him lifts him up or lifts it up, and all you see is a mask. So he may have had about half a second to do it, but he somehow made it look like he just completely vanished. And it was incredible. So if I ever were to be the Phantom in Phantom of the Opera, which is one of my dream roles, I would love to be able to see how I could pull off that trick.
oh yeah. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah. Phantom of the Opera definitely. mm, kind of has a nostalgic place in my own memory as well as the high school I attended did well performed it my senior year. I wasn't in it, but I saw it and they did such a great job. And they sold so many tickets. They actually added an extra show.
Wow.
It sold that well. And I think our school was one of the first in the country to actually do it, in fact.
Oh wow, that's actually really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember who you played? Or
Uh,
were you
no,
not
I
a
wasn't, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, this particular one was very memorable to me because it was my favorite production. It was the first and so far only time I've seen it live on stage, and it was a great memory that I now get to hold on to that I had with my parents before they eventually passed away.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, come well, Mother's Day, Father's Day season, I think I'm probably gonna have to treat you to dinner or something.
Well, I definitely appreciate it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So was that it?
Yeah, that was all of them.
All right. Yeah. It's kind of interesting the more I think about it. I started going out to musical theater productions for about as far back as I can remember. It, early on, anyway, for no particular reason. I think it probably took me several more years to be, as they say, bit by the theater bug. But I remember the first one that I remember seeing was back before we lived in another town in New York State before we came to Rochester. We saw my dad took my brother and me to a production of Oliver, the stage adaptation of the Oliver Twist novel by Dickens. And I think not long after that, we saw The Music Man in the same theater. And yeah, I remember not really thinking much of either of those at the time. I think the music more or less holds up from what I remember though. But I think it was not until like we came to Rochester. My brother and I were going to middle school that I really started to really see the, I guess, appeal of musical theater because my brother involved in middle school shows. He my the same kind of thing, perform stage and stuff. And my brother would do you know, shows like High School Musical and The Wizard of Oz, which I've talked about the Wizard being one of my personal dream roles. And yeah, and a lot. I just I don't think I think I really was that interested in doing it at first. I just thought it looked and sounded cool. Well, a lot of those kids sang really great and great. They performed really great, and it it looked kind of cool from a spectator's point of view.
Yeah, a lot of us definitely have different origins for what really brought us into the world of musical theater, whether we do it ourselves or we watch a lot more of them. And it's really cool to see that Oliver may have been the starting point for you.
Yeah.
Now, the only exposure I've had to Oliver is that Disney movie with the cats and dogs.
Oh, Oliver and Company. Yeah.
Yes. So I'm pretty sure from what I can tell, it's not one to one with the original story. So
Mm.
I will definitely have to see the stage version at some point to really understand what the story's about, or just read the book. One of the two.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah. Yeah. And I also I take when my sister was in middle school, she did Beauty and the Beast on the same stage that we did it just last year. And couple a couple of the kids who are in it with her as well. Well, were people that we also did Shrek the Musical with her as well,
Mhm.
and and Shrek the Musical was my first production with AU back in 2019, and several of those same kids who did it in that school production and were in that cast with us as volunteers. So in that way, it was a full circle experience for me.
Now, had they known you when you first saw the production?
Uh,
And then
I
when they saw you perform with them, they're like, "Hey, it's you."
No, honestly, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
That definitely would have been interesting, but the fact that you've seen them perform and now you're up there with them, there's just I imagine something really surreal about that,
Oh yeah, that definitely made it very special for me indeed.
and I love that for you.
Yeah. 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 Honestly, only well, it was kids like those and the kids I like watched doing these shows when I was going to school that probably inspired me more than anybody. I it's like they were so young and yet they could sing so amazingly and do all this acting really good. And I thought it was I'm probably a pretty cool and glamorous thing. I know now from my experience with Artists Unlimited, it's not always that easy. It's a pretty crazy work at times, but so I have more respect for how difficult it can be. But it it's still fun and pretty exciting. And I don't know. I just thought I thought even at a very young age they were so like professional level quality.
Yeah, a lot of young actors like us or those who are even younger, a lot of them will have practice or they'll have really good people directing them or teaching them. I know we've certainly had some great directors and still do for that matter.
Oh yeah.
And then, of course, you get the ones that just have this unexplainable natural gift where they just somehow just make every performance they do just naturally come alive in a way that really can't be explained. It's just something that they're born with, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, it is true for some, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another memorable spectator experience several years later after it actually happened in the same building, like, just within like maybe a couple hours of us rehearsing for Mary Poppins with Artists Unlimited. There was a smaller theater within the same building that was doing Little Shop of Horrors, which has personally become since then one of my all-time favorite musicals personally.
Now, would you say there's a particular reason for that, or is just something about seeing it that caused it to be your favorite?
Well, I think the performance was great. I think the story was great. I was going into this one pretty blindly, honestly. I knew little to nothing about it,
Sure.
but I just knew about it because we had one volunteer in our cast who was participating in it, who had probably casually mentioned it once or twice or so, and and she was participating in that, and I pretty much went home for just a little bit after rehearsal, came right back and saw it, and it was one of the most compelling stories I'd ever seen told on stage, and one of the most and taken some of the best songs that I've ever heard in musical. And yeah, and I remember I have this great memory. I don't know if I've really talked openly about it before, but I remember after one of our performances from Mary Poppins that year at AU a week or so later. I was, in the lobby like a bunch of the other cast, and one of the other cast in the show of Little Shop that whom I just met, that introduces me to her friend was going to high school with, who was also um, in the cast herself, and and who played specifically Audrey. And then Audrey actually, the one who played Audrey actually came back and watched our Beauty and the Beast show two different times that last year.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And she actually was taught dance by our new choreographer that we started working with starting on Beauty and the Beast. So there was that connection there, perhaps. It's probably a factor, but I remember, and I probably talked about this how this girl who played Audrey only, only told me after one of the shows, how funny my performance was in the first number. And I was just doing my job. I was just doing what I thought was expected of me or whatever. And maybe I took it up an extra mile, but to hear her say that, because if you know her, and I would love to introduce a lot of my castmates to her, including Jordan, she is a really naturally phenomenal singer, and she's really good on stage, and she'd done like a bunch of perhaps lead roles, and it was really encouraging and validating to hear her say that I was really that good.
I mean, you definitely are. I know I've said this a lot before, sometimes on this show, sometimes uh, in person, that a lot of us at Artists Unlimited, actors I'm talking about here, recognize how well you perform and how just invested you get in the role. It's like it's really natural, and that's really rare. And the fact that you can take direction from a director really well on top of it, that just makes it all the more special. So a lot of us, whenever the directors come up to us for ideas as to who should play what, we keep saying, if nothing else, we want Seth to have a big role because he truly deserves it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate that, and yeah. And this girl, you know, I see her every once in a long while or so, and she says, she'll be attending college not far away, and so she will keep coming back to see these shows, and which is real exciting. And she's been very supportive, and I'm just grateful to have her as a fan and a friend. And I would like for a bunch of you guys to meet her.
And I would very much love to do so.
Yeah, yeah. And then this this theater going happened not long after we wrapped up Beauty and the Beast, about maybe a month, a little less. It was a good friend of mine had just recently graduated from Houghton University, and they performed um, what has since become my other favorite, She Loves Me. It's just it's a show with a lot of good classical singing, witty lyrics, um, an interesting story of a of an unlikely relationship, and a lot of catchy material in it. And yeah, it was good getting to meet some of these, and the friend who suggested we go, like three of us went and kind of made a whole day of it. But this one friend who had recently graduated there, he had done several past shows there with a handful probably of these same college students. And so yeah, well, I got to talk to a couple of them afterwards, kind of share my experience with Beauty and the Beast not long before, and yeah, it was definitely special, and again, one of my favorite musicals.
Well, I can definitely see why. Personally, I don't know too much as of now about She Loves Me, but it definitely sounds intriguing, especially when you talk about it. So if I can find a way to see it, I definitely will.
Yeah, I was looking it up. I think there's on Amazon Prime the Broadway production of it,
Oh,
and it's got Zachary Levi, who was Flynn Rider in Tangled, and he plays the male lead, and Jane Krakowski, probably best known for 30 Rock and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, has a role in it as well.
hmm.
Yeah. So maybe I don't know if you have Prime or you know somebody who does, but maybe the easiest way.
I think I might know one or two people. I'll have to ask around.
Yeah. All right. All right. And then just this past a little less than a couple of months ago, I go to school and that high school I graduated from and where we do our AU shows performed Footloose based on the hit Kevin Bacon flick, and it also starred that Audrey girl as well as that other volunteer who I think brought up the Little Shop show, and yeah, it was a great way for me honestly just to see these two people again, and we had maybe like we had at least a couple of volunteers I know who were in this show, and
Hmm.
I remember uh, me and my friend going, and a bunch of the AU cast of Beauty and the Beast actually happened to be there that same night. Actually,
Oh, what do you know?
yeah, yeah, probably because of the one volunteer or so who was in it, but
Oh, maybe.
yeah, yeah, but again, a good story, like good message about empathy and dealing with trauma, and pretty good songs, very catchy and pretty fun songs, and yeah, I can't say anything but really positive stuff. I don't think.
Yeah, that's another one I'll have to check out because I don't think I actually have ever seen the stage version. I know I've seen the film,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I've ever actually seen it live. I'm pretty sure I saw Grease as a stage production a few years back, but not Footloose. So I'll definitely keep that one down on a list.
Yeah, I will say, I feel like, kind of like I was talking about earlier with Beauty and the Beast, this one adds a bit more meat to the plot. From what I remember, the one time I watched the movie prior, there wasn't a lot of explanation clearly given why the Reverend was so against public dancing, and which is like major storyline. But like, there's more explanation, especially in the second act, as to why he has this stubborn attitude. So
Okay.
I feel like it does the story a little bit more justice, for lack of a better word, than I remember the film doing the one time I saw it.
I feel like that can happen a lot. Again, because we were talking about how you can get more across with a live stage performance as opposed to a film.
Yeah. Um, and then the last one I wrote down happened about must have been about 3 weeks ago. Well, 3 and 4 because I technically saw it both weekends it was running. First time with one friend and the second time with another. Into the Woods, which some of you probably know, the film adaptation from a few years ago with Anna Kendrick and Meryl Streep and others.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
never did see it, but I remember a lot of people talking about it when it came out.
Yeah. Yeah. I never saw it myself, and I remember I remember hearing, somebody said, it wasn't that good, but this live, it was another school in my home suburb. It was very, very, very well done, and I feel like it's something I think I would recommend. It's definitely got some worthy themes that are relatively countercultural because we live in a culture that is so like happiness centric and like every man for himself. But this is one that really explores the consequences of doing whatever it takes to get what you want, and 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 follow up, taking desperate measures to achieve your dreams that you have for yourself. And and a very similar classical style of music, a lot of there was a lot of very good colorful set design, and a lot of these kids, and I've heard them, because I work in the school district in my suburb, and I've gotten to hear a lot of the kids sing at like retirement and academic year opening ceremonies, and they are really, really, really good. I remember telling one of them after the show, man, I thought they would be great for Artists Unlimited with us. I mean, you can only fit in so many volunteers, but I feel like if you could fit them in, they would be fantastic because they sing beautifully.
Now, do you think this could be a good show for Artists Unlimited to do soon?
I mean, I mean, there are some pretty dark elements or gags, or for if for the best that's best verbiage I can think of, but um, I feel like it is, yeah, no, a pretty dark, make it somewhat what violent, I suppose. I mean, it wasn't really that graphic when I saw it, but I feel like, I mean, I guess if you like fairy tales and really into like the fairy tale themes, I feel like it's something at least maybe worth considering. I don't want to say never.
Yeah, for those that are not aware, Artists Unlimited is an organization that Seth and I are a part of, and that we've been a part of for years, that gives an opportunity for those with varying types of disabilities to be able to perform, because a lot of them do not have that opportunity. But that also comes with the fact that some of them may or may not be sensitive towards certain things, whether it be dark elements or graphic violence or what have you. So there's certain types of shows that we would never be able to do with this group because it would be a little too much for them or some of the audience members, and that's fine. To give you an idea, I still remember when we did The Little Mermaid, and despite the fact that they'd seen it happen so many times by that point, whenever the scene came up of Triton destroying Ariel's little hidden cavern of stuff that she'd found, people in our cast were crying.
Hmm.
So if something is even remotely dark, like Into the Woods sounds like it is, probably wouldn't be able to do it. But I still have a lot of interest myself in seeing it at some point.
Yeah. Well, this production I saw definitely was well, one of the coolest that I've seen in my life. And again, a lot of those kids, the kids, they're just as good as anybody, if not better. And and I loved being able to talk to some of them, meet some of them after the show, you know, and be able to, with at least one of them, share my own experience with Artists Unlimited with them, and be able to break the ice that way with them because they're performing on stage now. I'm performing on stage, and and that was really the most fun for me.
Yeah, it's always good to meet other theater enthusiasts.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it for this time, and thank you for all streaming, watching, listening, whatever. can keep up with my updates on Instagram on Seth_Mariano_AU, and stream us on YouTube, Spotify, and any suggestions, questions, comments are very much welcome.
Absolutely. And if there's any theatrical performances that you've seen or even been a part of that have been extremely memorable for you for one reason or another, let us know. I know a few people that would probably say Hamilton, because that definitely exploded when that first came out. But yeah, any ideas, suggestions, questions, comments, concerns, or even ideas for future episodes, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, please. And until next time, take care, everybody.
So long.